I should have known the night would go sideways the moment we pulled up to Le Reveil. It wasn't the valet, though he looked at my 6-year-old Audi like it had wandered in off the wrong side of the freeway. It wasn't the hostess either, who smiled too tightly, her eyes skimming right past me to lock onto the sleek black SUV idling behind us, probably holding someone with a last name that got whispered in boardrooms. No. What told me everything was the way Alina avoided my gaze when we stepped into the elevator. Her fingers were laced in mine, but limp, like she was holding hands out of obligation, not affection. The kind of touch that says, "You're here, but just try not to make a scene." I'm Julian Marks, 32 years old, and I've learned to read a room the way a chef reads smoke. In my world, you learn early that warmth can burn and silence cuts deeper than insults. I built a career branding restaurants, breathing new life into dying kitchens. I started with grease-stained food trucks and ramen stands in neighborhoods where your shoes stuck to the floor. Now, Michelin whispers my name behind closed doors. But to Alina's family, I'll always be the guy who smells faintly of roasted garlic and ambition. The rooftop glowed in candlelight and curated jazz. Waiters floated like ghosts between tables too expensive for menus. Every chair was a silhouette of posture and privilege, every guest draped in silk and confidence. And then I saw it, the long table near the glass railing. 10 chairs, 10 bodies already seated, and not a single one of them moved when they saw us. My eyes swept the table quickly. Bernice Hargrove, Alina's mother, was at the head, naturally, pearls resting just above her collarbone like armor. Her mouth curled at the corners, the kind of smirk that's meant to pass as hospitality but feels like an insult you can't quite prove. She didn't stand, didn't even raise her glass. Just narrowed her eyes, tilted her chin, and said loud enough for half the rooftop to hear, "Oh dear, looks like we're at capacity." Alina froze, her fingers uncurled from mine. Bernice's voice carried again, all sweet venom and crystal diction. "Maybe a budget place suits you better, Julian." There it was, the opening jab, served chilled and on time. I glanced at the others, Miles, Alina's older brother, already looking down at his plate like it might offer an escape. Her cousin Reese took a sip of wine with the wide-eyed guilt of a man watching a car crash he didn't have the courage to stop. The rest? Blank faces. Distant. Practiced. No one said a word. Not even Alina. I stood there, momentarily suspended between options. The old me, the kid from East Winter who used to wash dishes in the back of a fusion diner and count coins for bus fare, would have tried to smile through it. Would have cracked a joke. Made peace with humiliation. But not tonight. Not anymore. Instead, I laughed. It came up before I could stop it. A clean, sharp sound that didn't match the music or the tension. A few heads turned from nearby tables. Alina blinked, startled. Bernice's smirk wavered, just a hair. And that was all I needed. "Maybe you're right," I said smoothly. "Maybe this table just isn't for me." I could feel the tension shift, Alina's hand instinctively reaching for mine, then hesitating halfway. She didn't know what I was about to do. Truth be told, neither did I. But something inside had hardened, crystallized. A line drawn clean and bright through the middle of my chest. I turned on my heel and walked away, not fast, not flustered. Just deliberate. Purposeful. Like a man walking toward a truth only he knows. The maitre d' stood at the host stand near the entrance, tapping something on a tablet. He looked up as I approached, ready to deliver the standard apology or offer to move me to a bar stool downstairs. But when our eyes met, his expression changed. "Mr. Marks," he said, straightening with a smile that actually reached his eyes. "Marcus mentioned you might stop by tonight." There it was. See, Bernice didn't know what she didn't know. She didn't know I'd been working behind the scenes with Marcus Langston, Le Reveil's owner and head chef, for over half a year. She didn't know that this very rooftop once teetered on the brink of bankruptcy before I came in, tightened the narrative, curated the experience, and made this place the kind of spot her friends now used as Instagram currency. She didn't know that while she thought she was inviting me into her world to humiliate me, I was already stitched into its foundation. "Chef Langston left a note for you," Dorian, the maitre d', continued. He stepped from behind the stand and motioned for me to follow. I glanced back, just once, as I moved past the bar and toward the private corridor. Bernice had leaned slightly in her chair, like a falcon spotting motion in the trees. Her eyes were narrowed again, but this time, with something harder to swallow, confusion. Good. We moved past the velvet partition, through a narrow hallway lined with photos from Le Reveil's rebirth, photos I'd picked, stories I'd helped write. The air shifted back here, calmer, more reverent. We reached the alcove known only to a few, a tucked-away chef's table with a view of the kitchen on one side and the skyline on the other. The table was set for one. A single taper candle flickered next to a sealed envelope. Dorian smiled and bowed slightly. "Enjoy, Mr. Marks." I pulled out the chair, sat down slowly, and opened the envelope. "To the man who gave this restaurant its heartbeat, dinner's on us. M." I smiled. No smirk. No pretense. Just quiet satisfaction. The kind that settles into your bones and tells you, you're exactly where you're meant to be. Back at the Hargrove table, I could feel Bernice watching. Could almost hear her mind spinning, trying to rewrite the scene. But it was too late. The dinner she planned to bury me had just become the night I came alive. And of all the tables in the world, this one? I didn't need it. I built my own. We met over spilled coffee and an argument about Wi-Fi. Alina was perched at a corner table in the grad library, books spread like wings around her, highlighter poised like a scalpel. I just wrapped up a meeting with a taco truck owner who wanted a logo that looked rich, but still spicy. I'd been running on 2 hours of sleep and an expired energy drink, juggling freelance branding gigs and coursework with the delicate precision of a man trying to keep his future from toppling over. When the campus internet crashed for the third time that week, I muttered something not so under my breath about institutional incompetence. Her voice cut through the silence. "Maybe don't blame the library because your tabs won't load. Tech bro." That was how it started. No swoon. No spark. Just friction. But she looked up, and I forgot how to breathe. Long hair ducked behind one ear, gold-rimmed glasses sliding down her nose, blazer too sharp for a student, she looked like a storm that didn't need thunder to command the sky. I remember blinking. She raised an eyebrow. "You're new," she said. "Guilty," I replied, trying to recover some pride. Julian Marks. Branding. Night owl. Surviving. Alina Hargrove. Corporate law. No time for fools. And yet somehow, from that moment, we were inseparable. There were differences, of course. Too many, if you asked her mother. Alina came from marble countertops and seasonal homes. She knew which fork went with which course and could speak French like it was woven into her bloodline. Me? I was raised by a single dad who worked doubles at a hardware store and taught me how to fix a sink before I knew how to spell sommelier. I had grit, hunger, debt. She had legacy, advantage, but she never held it over me. Not at first. "Alina liked my fire," she once said. She loved the way I talked about food like it had memory, like taste was a kind of time travel. She loved that I saw brands not as logos, but as stories, messy, flavorful, and human. We spent hours dissecting ad campaigns and wine labels, our arguments spilling into kisses, our ambition feeding off one another like kindling. We were in love, real love, the kind that dared to dream past the surface. But Bernice Hargrove? She sniffed me out the moment we shook hands. I still remember the first time I met her. Thanksgiving at their estate in Portsmouth Hills. I'd worn a blazer too cheap to pass inspection and brought a bottle of wine I'd Googled the night before. She accepted it with a brittle smile and placed it beside the others like a lost orphan. Then she turned to Alina and said, "You always did have a thing for fixer-uppers." Her words weren't loud, but they stuck. From that day on, I became the project, the man she was sure Alina would outgrow. I didn't dress right. I didn't eat right. I wasn't elevated enough. It didn't matter that I was burning myself at both ends to build something from nothing. To her, I was ambition in thrift store clothing. Alina tried. She did. She fought back in small, strategic bursts. "He's not like the others, Mom. He works harder than anyone I know. He's going to change everything." But Bernice's skepticism was layered, generational, calcified. Her love was conditional, her approval a maze with invisible walls. I remember one particular evening, early in our relationship, when Alina took me to a benefit gala hosted by the Hargrove Foundation. I wasn't on the official guest list. Bernice greeted me with a hug that felt like a pat-down and introduced me to the mayor as Alina's friend from school. I was wearing the suit I saved up for with 3 branding gigs and a refund check. That night, when we got back to my apartment, I asked Alina if she thought we could really make it. Her eyes welled up, but her voice didn't tremble. "I don't care what my mother thinks," she said. "She can choke on her pearls. I love you." That should have been the end of it. But love doesn't erase pressure. It just makes you willing to absorb it for a while. We married in a small garden ceremony. I wanted a beach. She wanted a vineyard. We compromised on charm. Her father didn't show. Her mother did, but left before the cake was cut. Said she had a conflict with the caterer, which everyone knew was code for, I've made my point. We built a modest home together, brick by brick. I worked. She worked. We split bills, split chores, split dreams. There were nights we danced barefoot in the kitchen and mornings when we argued over nothing. But even when we were exhausted or bruised, we kept choosing each other. Still, Bernice lingered. She'd call unannounced, drop by with little gifts like high-end throw pillows and subtle jabs. "Oh, you're still in this neighborhood?" Or, "I suppose this sofa is very practical." She questioned every choice I made, then smirked when I held my ground. And Alina? She said she was drawing boundaries. Said she was protecting our peace. But cracks began to show. At first, they were small. Alina would agree to weekend dinners with her mother even after I said I had work deadlines. She'd forget to tell me Bernice was joining us for brunch, or that she'd moved our date night for a charity function I wasn't invited to. She'd say things like, "just for this one night," or "let's not make a scene." And each time, I swallowed it. For her. For us. Because when you come from nothing, you learn to bend without breaking. But Bernice knew. She could smell the shift. Like a shark circling blood. She started pressing harder, insisting on events, undermining me in front of others, twisting her concerns into compliments. "I'm just saying, darling, you could have married someone more polished." And the worst part? Alina didn't always push back. Not because she didn't love me, but because she was tired. Tired of the tug-of-war. Tired of choosing. And I got it. I did. But the moment you stop defending what you've built together, that's when the foundation starts to rot. And Bernice? She saw the rot as proof. She once told Alina, within earshot, because subtlety was for people with shame, "He may love you, but does he really belong?" That's the question that haunted everything. Not whether I was good enough for Alina, but whether I fit in her world. A world of manicured hedges, monogrammed towels, and people who judge by the cut of your collar before they ask your name. So when that chair wasn't there for me at Louisville, it wasn't a shock. It was the culmination. The finale of a long game I didn't realize I'd been playing from the start. But the truth is, I didn't fall in love with Alina to win a seat at her mother's table. I fell in love with her heart, not her house. And that night, when I turned from Bernice's smirk and walked toward the life I'd built on my own terms, I remembered why I never needed permission to begin with. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from smiling too long at people who hope you'll fail. I used to think success would silence them. That if I just worked hard enough, booked the right clients, built the right reputation, married the right woman, they'd stop looking at me like I was a tourist in their world. But I was wrong. People like Bernice Hargrove don't get silenced. They just change the flavor of their condescension. If they can't ignore you, they find new ways to belittle you. With Bernice, her weapon of choice was always the dinner table. It started subtly, like seasoning. One missed invitation. A text sent after the RSVP deadline. A forgotten +1. "So sorry, Julian, it must have slipped my mind," she'd say with that faux sympathetic pout that always felt like it had a laugh hidden behind it. At first, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Mistakes happen, right? But then came the name cards. I'll never forget the gala for Alina's cousin's engagement party. Every place card was written in elegant script, names perfectly centered. Except mine. Mine read, Justin Marks. I was seated next to the catering table, right between the door and the ice sculpture of two doves mid-kiss. Alina squeezed my hand under the table, whispered an apology, then promised it wouldn't happen again. But it did. Again and again and again. Bernice had a way of making insults feel like etiquette. She didn't outright say I was unworthy. No, that would be uncouth. She preferred her cuts wrapped in compliments. "You clean up nicely," she said one night as I helped pour wine for her guests for a consultant. Or, "Oh, you do branding? Like business cards." One time, when I brought a bottle of a vintage I'd been gifted by a client, something I was genuinely proud to share. She turned it in her hand like she was evaluating the weight of a bowling trophy, then said, "Oh, how charming. I didn't know this label made it out of grocery stores." I could have called her out. Should have. But I didn't. Because the moment you fight back at those dinners, you confirm exactly what she's accusing you of, that you don't know how to behave, that you're emotional, that you don't belong. And nothing thrills people like Bernice more than watching you trip over your own pride in the middle of their polished parquet floors. So I played it cool, smiled, ate her under-seasoned lamb, let her guests pretend I wasn't there. But each time, I took note. not out of pettiness, but precision. I cataloged every slight like a sommelier tracks tannins. Because people think dinners are harmless. But the table? The table is where power lives. And Bernice? She held court with silver cutlery and white linen like a queen daring the peasants to spill something. But this dinner at Lurivale? It wasn't just another jab. It was her masterpiece. Her grand orchestration of erasure. I should have seen it coming. 2 weeks before the dinner, Alina told me her mother was planning something special for the Hargroves' anniversary. Just family, she said. I was darting away. But Mom insisted we both come. She said she wants to keep things peaceful. That should have been my first warning. Bernice never wanted peace. She wanted optics. And I was always the blemish on her curated canvas. Still, I agreed. I told myself it would be fine. That we'd show up. I'd sit through the evening with my practiced grace, and we'd go home to our life, our real life, untouched by the mess of her mother's vanity. But I didn't realize just how far Bernice would go this time. This wasn't a jab. It was execution by placement. Every seat at the table filled, every fork lifted, every glass raised, and no one thought to make room. The worst part wasn't the empty space or the fake apologies. It was the choreography, the way every cousin, every in-law, every friend of the family acted like this was normal. Like I should have expected to stand there awkwardly while the staff hovered, unsure of whether to offer me a drink or escort me out. Alina said nothing. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Her hand gripped her purse like it was the only thing anchoring her to the floor. And Bernice? She delivered the line with Oscar-worthy subtlety. Maybe a budget place suits you better. There was no malice in her tone. Just pure, powdered cruelty, refined and aged like her favorite burgundy. But this time, something in me split. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. It was something deeper than that. Something colder. A realization that I was done playing by the rules of a dinner table that had never been set for me. The humiliation didn't land, not the way she hoped. Because somewhere between all those missed name cards and half-hearted apologies, I'd stopped caring about being liked by people who saw kindness as weakness. I didn't flinch. I didn't plead. I laughed. It surprised even me, that laugh. It came out light, effortless. I wasn't laughing at a joke. I was laughing at the absurdity of it all, that this woman thought this moment would define me, that her approval was something I still needed, that she didn't know, didn't even suspect, what I had built quietly in the shadows of their luxury. She'd chosen Lurivale because it represented status, exclusivity, power. But what she didn't know was that 6 months ago, this same restaurant was circling the drain. And I had pulled it back from the brink. Not publicly, not with fanfare, but with strategy, taste psychology, and a vision she could never recognize because she didn't understand that real influence doesn't scream, it whispers. That's why the night at Lurivale didn't break me. Because it was never my battlefield. It was my blueprint. Bernice thought she was using the restaurant to bury me under shame. But all she did was walk into a building I had already branded, resurrected, and positioned to become the most sought-after culinary experience in the city. The irony was exquisite. And the best part? She didn't even know it yet. She thought she was closing a door on me. But in reality, she had just walked into the house I helped build. So I smiled, turned away, walked past the table like it was background noise. And as I moved toward the maitre d', I wasn't seeking refuge. I wasn't salvaging dignity. I was stepping into something that had always been mine. Because death by 1,000 dinners only works if you're still hungry for a seat. And me? I'd learned to bring my own table. Lurivale was never supposed to be mine. Not on paper. Not in whispers. Definitely not in Bernice Hargrove's universe. But when Marcus Langston called me that night, 6 months ago, voice tight with desperation and ego barely intact, I knew I was being invited into something far more valuable than a paycheck. I was being asked to revive a sinking ship wrapped in velvet. A fine dining institution with a rotting foundat. My cell buzzed again, this time, a text from Soraya. Everything okay? I didn't respond. Not yet. Lifting my chin, I turned toward the grand staircase that led back to the elevators. My footsteps echoed in the cavernous lobby as I walked with a newfound serenity. Gone was the panic, the shame that had clawed at me just moments before. In its place, a calm certainty settled across my shoulders like a tailored coat. I thought of the flash drive hidden in my bag, the backup of Client Sync Plus that survived deletion. I thought of Carmen's words and the promise of autonomy. Reaching the elevator bank, I pressed the call button but paused before the doors opened. I allowed myself one final look at Crane Strategies' towering facade, its mirrored windows gleaming with corporate pride. Somewhere inside, Delmont was still seated behind his imposing desk, convinced he held all the power. He didn't know that power had quietly slipped through his fingers. The elevator arrived with a soft ping, doors parting to swallow me into their steel embrace. As I stepped inside, I thought of the conversation to come, the calm delivery of my counteroffer to Delmont, the presentation of the Bravo Edge contract. I felt the weight of the future shift beneath my feet, the tilt of possibility beckoning me forward. When the doors closed, the world outside receded, leaving me bathed in the cool glow of the car's interior lights. I exhaled slowly, savoring the moment between endings and beginnings. In that breath, I realized I wasn't merely reacting to humiliation. I was seizing control, turning a devastating setback into my greatest opportunity. The elevator climbed, and with each passing floor, I felt lighter, freer. By the time I reached the boardroom level, I knew exactly how I would re-enter that room. Calm, collected, empowered. Because I had seen what mattered most. Respect was not something to be granted by others. It was something I claimed for myself. And with Bravo Edge's call still resonating in my ear, I was ready to claim it in full. I sat at my desk in the hushed glow of late afternoon light. The Bravo Edge contract spread before me like a map to a new world. My fingers hovered over the signature line, the weight of what I was about to do pressing into my chest. Crane Strategies had been my professional home for years, my greatest triumph and my deepest humiliation, but now it felt stifling, a gilded cage built on my father-in-law's notions of power. I drew in a long breath, recalling Delmont's scornful declaration of garbage in the boardroom and the metallic echo of that delete click. In that moment of destruction, I'd found my freedom. Now, I was ready to claim it. I dipped the pen and signed my name with deliberate strokes, each letter a proclamation. I was leaving. I rose slowly, folded the contract with measured care, and placed it in its envelope. Beside it lay the flash drive, the only surviving copy of Client Sync Plus, wrapped in a thin strip of tape. I felt a surge of satisfaction at the thought that Delmont's arrogance had protected my work from oblivion. He may have thrown it away on a whim, but I had ensured its survival. I collected the materials and tucked them into my briefcase, leaning back to glance around the office I had inhabited for so long. The taste of anticipation sifted through me, mingling with a trace of regret. Regret for the relationships I was about to cast aside, regret for the life I had invested here. But regret was a luxury I couldn't afford. Change demanded sacrifice. Down the corridor, the boardroom loomed like a shrine to corporate ritual. I unlocked the door quietly and stepped inside. 10 faces turned toward me in unified surprise, executives in tailored suits, analysts clutching notepads, and my wife, Soraya, who looked as if the floor had fallen out from under her. Delmont sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, expression inscrutable. His eyes flicked from my briefcase to my face, the corners of his mouth twitching with a curiosity I recognized, the thrill of power, hungry for any disruption to his control. I closed the door behind me and moved to stand at the center of the room, every eye converging like beams of spotlight. "I'll be leaving Crane Strategies," I announced, voice firm despite the quiver in my throat. The soft rustle of fabric against leather was the only sound for a heartbeat. Gasps erupted around the table, 2 analysts exchanged wide-eyed glances, an executive pushed back his chair, and Soraya bit down on her lip so hard I saw the tremor in her jaw. Delmont's posture shifted. He uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "You're walking out in the middle of a meeting?" he asked, tone a mixture of irritation and disbelief, as though I had violated some unwritten code of corporate decorum. "No," I replied, stepping closer to him so that my words held full weight. "I'm walking out of the shadow you cast over everything I do." I placed the Bravo Edge contract on the table in front of him, its crisp envelope snapping softly against the wood. "This is my next chapter." His gaze hardened as he picked up the envelope, inspecting the thick paper and embossed seal. I watched him, unblinking, as he recognized the gravity of my decision. Then I reached into my briefcase and withdrew the flash drive. The room went silent again as I held it aloft, the tiny device glinting under the overhead lights. "And this," I said, voice lowered yet unwavering, "is a backup of the project you deleted." A collective murmur rippled through the group. Layla from design pressed her fingertips to her lips, Trevor from accounts glanced at Simone, who whispered something inaudible. I met Delmont's eyes and saw something shift there, a flicker of uncertainty, perhaps regret. My heart pounded in my ears as Soraya rose, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She stepped forward, voice trembling. Malik, you don't have to do this. We can work through it. She reached for my arm, and I felt the familiar warmth of her touch. For a moment, I saw the life we might have continued together here, evenings in our Crane Strategies, branded apartment, celebrations for every milestone, Delmont's conditional approval lingering over us. But I remembered how he'd stifled my vision, how he'd equated innovation with insubordination. I shook my head gently, squeezing Soraya's hand before releasing it. No, I said softly, staring into her eyes. I have to. My voice cracked with sorrow and resolve. I can't be bound by someone else's ego. Not anymore. I turned away and headed for the door without another glance. I heard the shuffle of chairs, the gasp of executives, Delmont's low exhale. I paused at the threshold, looking back once more. The tableau of stunned faces froze in time, a snapshot of the moment I severed my ties and reclaimed my purpose. The door closed behind me with an almost reverent finality. In the hallway, the hum of conversation swallowed me, but the echo of my departure followed me like an omen. I walked toward the elevator, shoulders squared, every step lighter than the last. I felt a surge of exhilaration as I realized that today I hadn't destroyed anything. I had built a bridge to my own future. Crane Strategies would continue without me, but my path lay elsewhere. And as the elevator doors slid shut, I carried with me not just a contract and a flash drive, but the unshakable knowledge that when you refuse to live in someone else's shadow, you set yourself free. Walking into Brava Edge for the first time felt like stepping through a portal into the future I'd been chasing. The lobby was a vibrant clash of exposed brick, polished concrete, and floor-to-ceiling windows that let sunlight pour in like an invitation. Instead of hushed corridors and stifling hierarchy, there was an open-plan workspace where people clustered around high tables, trading ideas as fervently as baristas poured lattes from the espresso station. I'd never felt more alive or more certain I'd made the right choice. My new manager, Carmen Reyes, greeted me with a firm hug and a grin that seemed to light up every pixel on her bright orange blazer. Behind her, a wall-mounted digital display rotated through Brava Edge's core values: innovation, empathy, ownership. It occurred to me that these weren't just buzzwords slapped on laminated posters. They were living, breathing principles guiding every interaction. Carmen led me through the workspace, introducing me to colleagues who caught me mid-sentence with surprised smiles when I explained I'd built Client Sync Plus from scratch. Everyone's eyes lit up at those two words. No one scoffed at the concept of personalized birthday cards or AI-driven empathy tracking. Quite the opposite. They wanted to know more. That afternoon, I sat in on a brainstorming session with Brava Edge's leadership team, led by CEO Youssef Kane. Youssef was a warm presence in a sharp-cut suit, silver at the temples, but his eyes danced with mischief and intelligence. "Malik, welcome," he said, clasping my hand with both of his. "We've been waiting for you." I felt a ripple of pride at the simplicity of that welcome, no caveats, no subtle reminders of my place in some corporate pecking order. I was not a number. I was the reason clients stayed. Within my first week, I dove headlong into the work. The bones of Client Sync Plus survived intact, but now I had the resources to flesh it out fully. I commandeered a glass-walled conference room and drew our new roadmap across the whiteboard. Deeper AI sentiment analysis driven by natural language processing, an integrated CRM plugin suite, mobile notifications fine-tuned to client time zones, and a learning algorithm that adapted outreach strategies based on cultural nuances. My mind raced with possibilities: automated anniversary videos, proactive wellness check-ins, even holiday outreach tailored to every client's heritage. Here, the Sync Squad was reborn on a grander scale. By midweek, I'd assembled a cross-disciplinary task force, Layla Cruz, whose design sensibilities balanced brand consistency with emotional resonance, Trevor Winslow, the account manager who spoke fluent client voice, and Anton, a data scientist with a talent for turning raw logs into narratives. Together, we worked late into Thursday night, the glow of laptop screens reflecting our collective obsession. At 2 a.m., when the last barista finally locked up the coffee bar, we paused to lean back in our chairs and marvel at the functionality we'd built: an AI-generated mood meter that visualized client sentiment in a heat map, module buttons for custom video greetings, and an algorithm that suggested surprise, thank you gifts based on purchase history. Friday morning arrived on the wings of caffeine and excitement. We launched our internal beta, and within hours, 3 department heads had scheduled demos. When Layla presented the fresh, intuitive interface, one of them exclaimed, "This is exactly what we needed." Trevor handled follow-up calls, noting clients' genuine delight, and Anton fielded questions about integrating the system with legacy platforms. That afternoon, 3 major contracts were waiting on my desk, each one requesting an expedited rollout schedule. I could hardly believe it. In just 5 days, we transformed a prototype into a product that clients were queuing up to adopt. Meanwhile, word traveled fast. I received an email from a Crane Strategies liaison, only one name, no greeting. They'd heard about Client Sync Plus, revival, and were begging for an emergency licensing meeting. The irony wasn't lost on me. Suddenly, the firm that had wiped my work from their servers was scrambling to salvage their business. I forwarded the request to Carmen with a single line, "Your move." By Monday morning, my phone was alight with notifications, meeting invites, Slack pings, calendar alerts. Edge was calling me visionary, game changer, and essential. The title of son-in-law no longer lurked behind every interaction. Instead, I was Malik, our chief strategy architect. The words felt strange on my tongue, but the truth of them settled warmly in my gut. That afternoon, I received a text from Soraya. She'd heard about Crane Strategies outreach and was torn. "They're asking for the system back," she wrote. "Dad wants to license it from Edge." He said he's sorry. My thumb hovered over the phone. Part of me ached at the prospect of reconciliation, but I knew better. Delmont's regret was shallow. His apology would coerce me back into the same suffocating dynamic. I typed a single word in reply, "Blocked," and then watched the interface confirm I'd silenced that contact forever. As the sun set, I shut down my laptop and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The lights of Lagos flickered like distant stars, but here in Edge, we had captured our own. I closed my eyes and allowed myself a moment to savor the freedom, the absence of doubt, the thrill of building something without constraints. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, and new horizons. But tonight, I felt whole. I stepped away from the window, shoulders relaxed, pulse steady. Innovation thrived here, nurtured by people who believed in giving credit where it was due. Every time I looked at the Edge emblem on my desk, I remembered how fragile respect can be when handed out as a discount, but how transformative it can become when it's earned and shared freely. And as I walked out of the office, keys in hand, I knew that this was only the beginning of what I would build when nobody stood in my way. The morning my inbox filled with cancellation notices, I realized that the power of Client Sync Plus extended far beyond the boundaries of our code. It was living proof that when you build something people love, they'll come to you, even without a single outreach call. I swiveled in my chair at Edge Open Plan Workspace, watching the notifications pop up. Tria Alderman has canceled her renewal. Arctis Foundation will not be continuing. Peterson Group terminating contract. Each message arrived like a drumbeat, echoing through the room and rattling the legacy of Crane Strategies. I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction, then forwarded the cancellations to Carmen with a brief note. They came to me. By mid-morning, the buzz of celebration in our bullpen was tempered only by the realization that these departures signaled seismic shifts in the consulting world. Account managers gathered around my desk, grinning and eager to swap stories. Layla Cruz hugged me in passing, murmuring, "I've never seen anything like this," while Trevor Winslow shook my hand so hard I thought he might break my fingers. Their enthusiasm was contagious, affirming that Client Sync Plus wasn't just a product, it was a movement. Across town, Delmont Crane sat behind his expansive walnut desk, fields of mahogany shelves behind him, surrounded by the trophies of his 50-year career. I imagined the knot of anger and disbelief twisting in his chest as he scrolled through the same cancellation notices that now populated my morning. In his world, efficiency reigned supreme. Logic dictated loyalty. He believed that clients would cling to Crane Strategies out of habit, inertia, and fear of change. He was about to learn that when those a firm supposedly serves fall in love with someone else's vision, loyalty becomes optional. Late that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a single text from Soraya. "Dad's asking if you'll license the system back to him." I stared at the words, feeling the old tug of family duty tighten around my heart. I could almost hear Delmont's voice. "You're lucky to have it in. Give us another chance." I pictured him in his glass-walled office, clinging to the remnants of control like a drowning man to driftwood. But I had learned something vital in these past weeks. True respect isn't something you beg for, it's something you earn and protect. I drafted my reply carefully, tell him no. I tapped send and locked my phone, resisting the temptation to engage further. There was something liberating in that decision, a clear boundary drawn between my past and my future. Licensing back to Crane Strategies would have felt like handing a life raft to the person who'd tried to drown me. I pushed away from my desk and stood, stretching limbs stiff from hours spent coding and strategizing. I moved to the kitchenette, poured myself a glass of water, and watched the Lagos skyline through the panoramic windows. In the distance, the afternoon sun dipped low, casting a golden sheen over the city, a reminder that every ending carried the promise of a new dawn. Back at my workstation, I opened Slack and saw channels bursting with celebration and strategy. Our next step was clear. Capitalize on Crane Strategies' missteps by offering seamless migration packages to departing clients. I drafted a quick roadmap for a welcome aboard campaign, complete with personalized video messages, live onboarding sessions, and a VR tour of BraviEdge's innovation lab. The entire team chimed in, adding insights and refining timelines. Our collective energy crackled like electricity, purposeful, unstoppable. That evening, I slipped out to meet Carmen and Youssef for dinner at a quiet waterfront restaurant. Over grilled fish and chilled coconut water, they toasted to our success, their words warm with genuine admiration. Youssef leaned forward, his eyes reflecting the candlelight. You've proven what I always believed, he said. Innovation thrives when people are trusted to lead. I sipped my water, feeling gratitude and resolve swirl inside me. I knew there would be tougher days ahead, new competitors, unforeseen technical hurdles, the constant pressure of scaling, but tonight was about acknowledging how far we'd come. As we stood to leave, I glanced back at the table where empty plates and glasses caught the soft glow of lanterns. Carmen slipped me a handwritten note. Thank you for believing in us. I pocketed the note, savoring the simplicity of the gesture, a far cry from the sterile emails and curt dismissals of my past. I stepped out into the warm night air, the ocean breeze lifting the hem of my jacket, and inhaled deeply. Each breath tasted of opportunity and fresh starts. Walking home along the waterfront promenade, I reflected on the irony of that morning's cancellations. To most, losing clients would feel like defeat. To me, it was a clarion call. Clients were seeking more than efficiency. They yearned for relationships, for systems that honored their humanity. Client Sync Plus had given them exactly that, and in doing so, it upended the very firm that had tried to crush it. At home, I found Soraya waiting on our balcony, the city lights reflected in her eyes. She offered a tentative smile, as though testing whether our relationship could adapt to this new reality. I moved to stand beside her, wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and pointed out over the water where the lights of the city danced. They came to me, I said softly, echoing the day's refrain. She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. You deserve this, she whispered. In that moment, I realized how far I'd journeyed from the man who once sought validation from the CEO's approval. Respect was no longer a privilege I chased. It was the foundation upon which I built my life and business. And as the night settled around us, I felt a quiet certainty that the new standard I'd established at BraviEdge would ripple outward, redefining what it meant to be a leader, a colleague, and a champion of innovation. 8 weeks had passed since I first walked into BraviEdge's sleek offices with a contract and a dream, and in that time, the world I knew had been irrevocably transformed. I sat at the head of our glass-walled conference room, the morning sun filtering through the blinds and slanted stripes across the polished table. Around me, the team buzzed with energy as we pored over the latest numbers. BraviEdge had absorbed 40% of Crane Strategies' client base. 40%. The figure felt surreal, like a testament to our collective conviction that respect and innovation could outmatch entrenched complacency. I traced the margin of my notebook, where I doodled the phrase "new standard" weeks ago, and realized we'd exceeded even my boldest expectations. The door slid open, and Layla Cruz stepped in, her portfolio tucked under one arm and a triumphant smile lighting her eyes. Trevor Winslow followed, adjusting his tie with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years navigating boardrooms. I stood to greet them, feeling a surge of pride at their presence, two of Crane Strategies' best account managers, now right here at my side. Layla crossed to the whiteboard and tapped a chart displaying our client acquisition timeline. 8 weeks ago, she said, tone tinged with disbelief, we were the underdogs. Now look at us. I nodded, recalling her first hesitant email, confessing she'd reached out because she was tired of watching good ideas get crushed under Delmont's rigid doctrine. She had risked her career for a chance to build something that mattered. Trevor stepped forward, sliding a fresh sheet of paper onto the table. I've compiled feedback from our newly acquired accounts, he announced, eyes flicking to mine with excitement. They're not just happy, they're evangelical. They're referring us to partners, competitors are whispering about us at conferences, and 3 more mid-tier firms are ready to negotiate as we speak. The words rang out like applause in the quiet room. I leaned back in my chair, shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. This wasn't just about numbers. This was about building a movement, a paradigm shift where empathy and analytics dance together instead of fighting for dominance. Between the stats and the celebrations, I found myself wondering about Delmont. I imagined him at Crane Strategies, perched behind his mahogany desk, eyes narrowed as he stared at dwindling renewal reports. I could almost hear him muttering about efficiency and ROI, doubling down on spreadsheet-driven tactics as clients slipped through his fingers. His pride, once so formidable, was now the very force propelling the exodus he so desperately tried to stem. I felt no triumph in his pain, only the quiet satisfaction that his refusal to embrace nuance had set the stage for a new era. As our debrief wound down, I excused myself and returned to my private office, a smaller, sunlit space furnished with a single desk and a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the Nespresso machine, its hiss steady and reassuring. My eyes drifted to the framed flash drive on the shelf, the original backup of Client Sync Plus, a silent reminder of where this all began. I swirled the coffee in my mug, savoring its warmth, and considered the journey. The boardroom deletion, the Bravi Edge call, the clandestine reconstruction, and now, this triumphant moment. Each milestone had taught me that innovation required not just vision, but the courage to stand by that vision when others sought to dismantle it. Layla's words echoed in my mind. We were tired of watching good ideas get crushed. I realized then that this fatigue extended far beyond the walls of Crane Strategies. Across industries, bright concepts languished in the shadows of risk-averse leadership, buried beneath the weight of tradition. Here at Bravi Edge, we had cracked open that tradition, flinging its doors wide for creativity and compassion. I set my coffee mug down and tapped a few commands on my laptop, sending a company-wide memo to celebrate our 80-day milestone. In the email, I wrote not of percentages or profit margins, but of the people behind those numbers, the account managers who believed, the clients who embraced change, and the colleagues who transformed a prototype into a lifeline for Fortune 500 companies. That afternoon, the video call request blinked on my screen. Delmont Crane. I paused before clicking accept, feeling the familiar churn of adrenaline. Part of me ached to see if he'd softened, if pride had finally given way to humility. But I knew better. His version of respect was conditional, tied to deference rather than merit. I declined the call, sending a brief reply. No further discussion necessary. As I hit send, I felt a lightness settle over me, a clarity that came from refusing to revisit old wounds. Instead, I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and turned back to the future we were building, one where the new standard was defined not by who wielded power, but by who harnessed it to elevate others. That evening, I joined the team for our weekly Innovation Hour, a tradition at Bravi Edge where anyone could pitch wild ideas, from AI-driven emotional analytics to gamified client journeys. I watched as a junior developer demoed a prototype for a virtual reality onboarding experience, and another teammate proposed a deep learning model that predicted client needs before they even expressed them. Laughter and debate filled the room, ideas zipping between desks like fireflies in dusk. I raised my cup in a silent toast to them all, the dreamers, the doers, the believers. In their passion, I saw the living embodiment of the new standard we'd set, a culture where innovation wasn't a buzzword, but the air we breathed every day. And as the night wound down, I realized that in building Bravi Edge, I had not only honored the potential of Client Sync Plus, I had sparked a revolution in respect and creativity that would echo long after any boardroom deletion. The call came on a Tuesday morning, just as I was settling into my routine of reviewing strategic dashboards and sipping my first cup of coffee. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, an area code I recognized as Crane Strategies headquarters. A chill ran through me as I answered. Malik, came the tight voice of Gideon Marshall, Crane COO. Delmont wants to speak to you. He's asked me to set up a meeting, maybe discuss partnership, or even selling the firm. Are you interested in buying or leading? I felt the weight of the question settle into my chest like an anchor. After 8 weeks of watching Crane Strategies hemorrhage clients to Brava Edge, I could almost hear Delmont's pride cracking. He was offering me the keys to the kingdom he had once denied me. A final, desperate gambit to salvage his legacy. My heart pounded as I considered my answer. I could buy the firm, lead it, bend it to my vision, but at what cost? To tether myself once more to the man who had deleted my work, who had valued me only as family, not as talent? Thank you, Gideon, I said after a moment, my voice steady. Please tell Delmont I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in buying or leading Crane Strategies. My future lies here at Brava Edge. I ended the call before he could respond, the line going silent in my ear. I placed the phone on my desk and leaned back, letting out a long exhale. The irony was delicious. The very firm that had dismissed me as garbage was now begging for a lifeline. But I refused to be drawn back into their orbit. I would not be their reluctant savior, indebted to the man who had tried to break me. Across town in his expansive office, I imagined Delmont's face contorting with disbelief and frustration. His legacy, built over decades of deals and boardroom victories, was crumbling around him, and now he scrambled for a partnership with the very innovator he had spurned. I allowed myself a small smile, not out of malice, but as an acknowledgement that his own rigidity had brought him to this moment of vulnerability. He had never seen beyond his spreadsheets. Now those spreadsheets told a story of retreat and defeat. Back at Brava Edge, the team burst into applause when I shared the news. Layla tossed a high five my way. Trevor clapped me on the back. Carmen Reyes hugged me, her eyes shining with pride. You did it, she said. You didn't have to even consider it. I shook my head, smiling broadly. I'm building something, I replied, not rescuing ghosts. Their applause felt genuine and earned proof that leadership meant guiding others forward, not clinging to the past. The remainder of the day buzzed with forward momentum. I convened a strategy meeting to discuss our expansion plans, mapping out territories and sectors where Client Sync Plus could disrupt stagnant incumbents. We talked of partnerships with fintech startups, integrations into healthcare CRM platforms, and pilot programs in emerging markets. Each idea felt fueled by the contrast between the stifling atmosphere of Crane Strategies and the open horizons of Brava Edge. I realized that my refusal of Delmont's offer wasn't just a rejection, it was a declaration of independence. That evening, I was invited to speak on a virtual industry panel about client engagement trends. The moderator introduced me as the architect behind Brava Edge's meteoric rise. As I shared insights on the convergence of AI and human-centered design, I felt a thrill at the thought that Crane Strategies might be tuning in, desperate to glean whatever wisdom they'd once dismissed. Panelists asked about overcoming organizational resistance, and I spoke candidly of my own experience, how one man's deletion taught me the importance of stewarding innovation, of finding partners who truly believe in your vision. I concluded, never delete what you don't understand. You might be erasing the very thing that holds your company together. After the panel, I returned to my desk to find an email from Gideon Marshall. He wrote simply, Delmont regrets how things ended and hopes to maintain a cordial relationship. I deleted the message without reading further. I didn't need his regrets. I needed the trust and respect of the team building the future alongside me. Later that night, I walked home beneath a sky strewn with stars, the city's lights flickering like distant embers. I reflected on the path that had led me here, from the nephew-in-law chasing validation, to the scrappy innovator who refused to back down, to the leader forging a new standard in consulting. I thought of Soraya, who had chosen clarity over conflict and parted ways quietly 6 months after I left Crane Strategies. There was no bitterness between us, only acceptance that our values had diverged. In choosing myself, I had also chosen authenticity. At my apartment, I paused at the window overlooking the skyline. The city stretched out in a tapestry of lights and possibility. I felt grounded by the knowledge that my worth wasn't measured by anyone's approval but by the impact I created. Crane Strategies would become a cautionary tale. I'd share it often at conferences and in boardrooms, a parable of hubris and missed opportunity. And Brava Edge would continue to grow, guided by a culture that honored each person's contribution, where no idea would ever be deleted without careful consideration. I turned away from the window and switched off the light, ready to rest before another day of innovation lay ahead. The echo of that deletion click might still linger in my memory, but it no longer held power over me. Instead, it served as a reminder. Sometimes the greatest opportunity emerges when someone else tries to erase you. And in that erasure, you discover the freedom to build your own legacy. Every morning, I begin my day the same way. A strong cup of coffee, a glance at the Lagos skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Braviedge's Global Strategy Suite, and a moment to breathe in the quiet hum of possibility. It's a ritual born of necessity, an anchor in a world that moves at the speed of innovation. Yet no matter how many times I repeat it, I never fail to feel the pang of contrast between this sunlit space and the darkened boardroom where Delmont Crane once struck delete on everything I'd built. That echo of a click reverberates in my mind like a taunt and a triumph all at once, a sound I carry with me every time I press save. Since that boardroom exile, Braviedge has grown beyond even my loftiest predictions. We now lead client engagement for dozens of Fortune 500 companies, each relationship nurtured by the very ethos that Crane Strategies could never embrace. Respect as a living practice, not a ledger entry. My days are filled with strategy sessions and innovation workshops, punctuated by moments of stillness when I remember how fragile progress can be. I remind myself that every line of code, every personalized outreach sequence, may one day face its own deletion attempt. And that's why I guard our culture so fiercely, because innovation without protection is like a candle in the wind. This morning, as I step into the conference room for our weekly global stand-up, a hush falls over the team, an unspoken recognition that I've become more than a leader. I'm a symbol. Youssef Kane stands at the head of the table now, a subtle nod from him that this space is ours to shape. He smiles when our eyes meet, and I catch the reflection of that moment in the sleek black glass behind him, the man who once needed permission to prove his value, now guiding a movement built on autonomy and shared purpose. Across the table, Layla Cruz clicks through a new series of mock-ups for the AI-driven empathy dashboard, a visual tapestry that translates client sentiment into color-coded streams. Her designs flow like living data, cool blues where satisfaction is high, warm oranges where alerts require personal attention. She explains how the new interface will allow account managers to anticipate client needs before a single call is made. I nod, thinking of how far we've come from the rudimentary sentiment flags of Client Sync Plus's earliest prototype. The memory of scribbled flowcharts on legal pads and midnight coding sprints still fuels my appreciation for every incremental improvement we celebrate now. After Layla, Trevor Winslow takes the floor, presenting a partnership proposal with a leading healthcare provider interested in embedding our system within patient outreach platforms. His excitement is infectious. He describes how proactive check-ins and personalized follow-ups can improve patient outcomes and strengthen provider loyalty. I recall the conversation I had in Delmont's office when I first advocated for blending analytics with empathy. He dismissed it as fluff. Now, industries that once scoffed at personalization are clamoring for the very magic he denigrated. It's a quiet vindication, one I savor in the chambers of my heart even as I choose gratitude over triumphalism. Later in the afternoon, I retreat to my private office to prepare for an upcoming keynote address at an international consulting summit. The invitation came weeks ago, a token of our ascendance in the field. I plan to share the cautionary tale of Crane Strategies alongside Braviedge's rise. How one man's inability to understand nuance led to his firm's unraveling, and how a single click of arrogance birthed an opportunity tenfold greater than any deletion could imprint. I want the attendees to walk away with more than data points. I want them to feel the weight of possibility, the responsibility that innovation demands. As I draft my speech, my phone buzzes with a message from Soraya. 6 months have passed since our quiet separation, and yet her words still carry the warmth of shared history. "Hope you're well," she writes. There's no subtext, no plea for reconciliation, just a fleeting connection between two people who once tried to build a life under someone else's shadow. I type back, thriving, and pause. I consider sharing more, an acknowledgement that she helped me find clarity even as she stepped away. But I decide some bridges need not be rebuilt. They were meant to carry us forward, not bind us to the past. I hit send and set the phone aside, the screen dimming into standby. Later, the summit keynote takes shape, an opening anecdote about the delete click that defined my career, followed by an analysis of how empathy-driven design can coexist with hard ROI metrics. I weave in case studies from Brava Edge's recent wins, highlighting how our voluntary cancellations, clients choosing us over former allegiances, served as the ultimate endorsement of our philosophy. I plan to conclude with a call to action, to never delete what you don't understand, to nurture ideas with both precision and heart, and to remember that respect, once earned, can become the bedrock of enduring success. Before the day closes, I make two critical decisions. First, I'll formalize a mentorship program at Brava Edge for emerging leaders, ensuring that our culture of empowerment filters through every level of the organization. Second, I'll commission a commemorative plaque in our lobby. A simple steel frame inscribed with the words, "Innovation saved by respect." Beneath it, a sculpted representation of a click, an homage to the moment that could have been my end but became my genesis. It will stand as a reminder to every visitor that the smallest actions can echo through whole careers. That evening, as I lock up and step into the warm breeze of dusk, I find myself humming the melody I used to play on my guitar in college, an old habit I'd abandoned in the frenzy of deadlines. The chords feel rough beneath my fingers, but beneath them flows a quiet joy, the satisfaction of a life rebuilt on authenticity. Across the street, I glimpse the glow of a construction crew raising new apartments, each brick a testament to human effort and vision. I smile at the symmetry. Just as buildings rise from solid foundations, so too did my career rise from the bedrock of a single, consequential click. Walking home, I pause at the stately gate of my apartment complex, tracing the wrought iron scrollwork with a fingertip. Inside lies a life I chose for myself. Mornings of purpose, afternoons of creativity, evenings of quiet reflection. I think of the day I offered Delmont Crane the flash drive containing my deleted work and told him, "I'm walking out of the shadow you cast over everything I do." That decision felt like stepping from darkness into light. Tonight, I stand firmly in that light, unafraid of deletions yet mindful of the power they carry. As I unlock my door, the familiar scent of home envelopes me, books on the shelf, lingering notes of dinner still in the air, the soft hum of the stereo. I take a moment to soak it in, grateful for the duality of my journey, the pain of being undervalued that taught me my worth, and the freedom I seize that now fuels my future. In the kitchen, I fill a glass with water and raise it in a silent toast to the click that echoed across my life. Tomorrow, I will stand before hundreds of consulting leaders, speak of failures and triumphs, and challenge them to nurture the ideas they might otherwise delete. But for now, I am home, surrounded by the quiet proof that when respect guides innovation, no click of erasure can truly silence the promise of what's saved.